and moderator, Professor Rupa Agarwal, and everyone who have registered and are attending the webinar. I would briefly introduce all the panelists one by one. Professor Rupert Waldron, International Diversity Tutor and Associate Lecturer. Rupert Waldron researches and teaches on cultural, economy, transnational contexts in the School of Media and Communication at London College of Fashion, University of the Arts, London. He is currently completing a PhD with Westminster Communication and Media Research Institute on the interface between UK art and design higher education and creative labor in Mumbai and Shanghai. He publishes and contributes regularly as translations editor to the International Journal of Fashion Studies. Our second panelist is Dr. Daniel Felsted. Dr. Felsted is an experiential designer and educator. He currently holds the position of course leader of the MA and BA honors courses of Fashion Media Practice and Criticism at the London College of Fashion. In his own practice, he has produced digital exhibition and live works for organizations including the British Museum, Google, Nike, Samsung, Serpentine Galleries, Tate, and Victoria Albert Museum. He has taught and presented internationally and contributed numerous essays for publications including Revolver Publishing, the Swedish Dance History, and Tate Publishing. Mr. Vikram Bawa. Vikram is a fashion photographer, film director, and a photo artist based in Mumbai, India. Known for pushing the thresholds of art and creativity with new techniques, styles, fashion films, cinema, cinemagraphs, stop motion, CGI, and much more. Vikram brought 3D photography to India way back in 1998 and created the first ever 3D covers for magazines like Elle and others in India, and was awarded the second prize at PMA USA with his 3D work traveling to 30 countries. Winner of more than 15 international awards, Vikram has been included in the 200 best advertising photographers list in the world by Lazar's Archive International. He has been awarded the title of most influential person in the business of photography in India by Asian Photography and has featured in the list continuously for many times. Mr. Dev Kumar Majumdar. Dev is a partner and client service executive communication sector in IBM India Private Limited with 26 years of management consulting experience. He specializes in technology consulting and implementation of large and complex IT solutions in multinational enterprises. He is a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Presidency College, Kolkata, and also a graduate from the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He is an MBA and holds an advanced diploma in systems management. Dev is a frequent speaker in leadership, innovation, and thought leadership sessions within his organization and also in external forums. He is a widely traveled person, and his interest lies in watching cricket, English Premier League, and Formula One. Professor Dr. Rupa Agarwal. Professor Agarwal is a graduate from the School of Planning and Architecture and postgraduate from IDC IIT Mumbai in product design. She has worked in the various architecture, interior design, and product design firms and NGOs in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai, before setting up a proprietorship firm offering visual design services to individual clients as well as corporates. She realized that her passion is to guide young minds to traverse the world of design and fall in love with it. In order to do this, she turned to being a design educator. She has taught in premier design schools in India for almost 2 decades now. She is currently the Campus Academic Coordinator of National Institute of Fashion Technology, Mumbai campus. Her research interests are bridging the link between theory and practice. She explored this in her PhD, which resulted in modeling conjecture analysis approach to sustainability pedagogy. I welcome them all and hand over to Rupa and Agarwal to take the discussion ahead.
Yeah.
Rupa.
Yeah. Thanks, Sushmita. That was quite an introduction. And we have an August panel here. Good morning to the panelists from London, and good afternoon to the panelists from Mumbai and Kolkata. I think it's absolutely wonderful that we can do this, where we are in touch with people from across the world, come together, real time, but from the comfort of our own spaces. Whether it be lockdown or quarantine or social distancing, it has kept us away from each other. But I don't think it has really stopped us from being in touch. I think this is the time when we are in touch with the outside world more than any other time. And I think that has also led to a little bit of a fatigue in terms of Zoom and WebEx fatigue, because it's just incessant throughout the day. But at the end of the day, I think the wonderment still continues. So we have with us an August audience, as Sushmita introduced, and we are going to discuss, and they are going to share their views on what to expect from the communication industry and how to deal with it. What is the future of it? Now, talking about future, I think future and change are probably the two words which are being bombarded on us from all the quarters. There is media talking about it, various channels talking about it, there are news articles about it. And then one wonders, why is it suddenly that everybody is becoming so feverishly obsessive about the future? But if you take a moment and think about it, I think as a race, humans have always been fascinated by the future and thinking about it. And we have enough examples of it in sci-fi, fiction, literature. In fact, the title of today's webinar, Through the COVID Looking Glass, is also an inspiration from Lewis Carroll's classical work, where the protagonist Alice looks through the looking glass into a fantastic wonderland. So we look into the COVID looking glass and let's see what we can see through it, and the panelists will help us do that. Talking about design, I think as designers, we are, by the very nature of it, people who look into the future. Because when designers visualize, they are not visualizing something which exists. It is something that is going to come in probably the near future, or the future which is a little far ahead. Whatever the case may be, which is why I think the design industry, and especially the fashion industry, is very dependent on trend research and fashion forecasting. And there is a lot of talk about a disruption or a breakdown, especially for the manufacturing sector with this present pandemic. And that might be so because of the close down of the huge infrastructures and workforce not being able to deliver and all of that. But I think there has also been a strategic breakdown, because the trends that were predicted and forecasted, and that which the entire industry was working towards, is now not relevant anymore. The situation that we are in today has probably not been really thought about as clearly, and now we are living it. So now that we are living it, probably we can shift gear and again predict and forecast something which is more real and something which is more stable. So that our work towards it can be more constructive. And talking about future, I think we have something which is very current and now, and which is staring us in the face, and that is the fact that there are numerous students who are going to be graduating in the year 2020, young professionals who have just stepped into the industry. What is it that is there in store for them? What is it that they can do? And if we all accept the fact that there is going to be a lull, is there something that they can do in order to equip themselves for what is to come? This is what with these thoughts, I will take it forward and ask Vikram about what he thinks about what is the state of the communication industry, and especially the photography industry which he's part of. What are the new areas he sees emerging? Or are we just obsessive about new areas? Or should we just concentrate on what are the new modes of working? I think that would be more practical. Vikram?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Stepping on to the question, I've already been having conversations with people in the industry, clients, vendors, and so I think there'll be a couple of things that are going to happen. Digital is going to suddenly, I mean, it's already there, but it'll be the predominant space where, from a photography perspective, the visual communication will happen. It's not like shoots will stop, because I'm already getting inquiries for photography campaigns and shoots. So, because that is a very physical thing that needs to be done. I mean, we've had during this lockdown period a whole, new category of FaceTime photography and FaceTime photo shoots. But you have to understand that there's a limit to how much that can be done, because without a team, especially in our space, I mean, from a fashion perspective, I cannot work without clothes from a designer. I cannot work without a makeup artist. There's a limit to how much I can do. Yes, there are a lot of apps which are coming up, and which have already been there and are being pushed more aggressively, that you can do makeup on post. You can just shoot and do eye makeup, hair makeup. Your hair can be changed, backgrounds can be changed. But having said that, we may be slow, our budgets may come down, but that part of the industry is not going to stop. Because, I mean, look at it. How do you make a movie? You can't make a film on FaceTime. You would have to physically, yes, like I said, budgets would come down, teams would come down, work would slow down, maybe processes would be put in place for your sanitizing, so that everything is done in a different way, more controlled, more cleaner, more sanitized way, which is something I think is great for the whole world, where we start understanding, especially for India, where we start giving more emphasis on cleanliness generally. Okay. Now, talking about, okay, future, what else is going to come? What technologies? Well, yes, technology is always evolving. We'll always have apps. We'll always have ways to, let's say, project more. Like I said, if I'm a photographer, whatever way I create my image, I still need to have them out there, which is already happening with Instagram and everything. What will happen is that the advertising sector will jump more, I feel, on social platforms to showcase their own works, or use influencers, to create work which is easier to show and reach out on Instagram, Facebook. See, this was happening. It'll pick up a little more speed. Okay, print was as it is slowing down, not going far forward, not innovating in a way. So social was already there, as you would say. So there's already that in place. It'll just get more aggressive. When you come to youngsters coming out there, when you talk about youngsters, how are they going to go out there and do something? Well, I mean, I think it'll be the same for most of us. Even someone like me, I have to reinvent myself in terms of the way I work, the type of people I work with, or the budgets we work in, the type of shoots which are large scale will suddenly come down, or the shoots will happen where, we were already doing 50% of post production. Maybe we'll end up doing 90% of post production, where we had the, advantage earlier of making sets. Now it'll all go CGI. Everything has to be done post, if possible, to save on cost, save on the, let's say, the health issues that we have. So I see that as the challenge or the more futuristic way in my industry. For the younger generation, well, I would say innovate new ways of showcasing your work, innovate new ways of creating images which are simple yet out there, dynamic, have a story, have a conversation, so that it resonates with clients, if you want to call it resonates with the brand, so the brand can accept you, take your work and take it forward. Because just doing normal photography, just shooting the regular, is going to be difficult, and it's not going to help sell your work or something for the client. So otherwise, I don't see a drastic change in terms of the way. Like I said, I mean, I make films. How can I make a film online on Zoom? I can't. There'll be a limit to it. I can script it and people can shoot it in different spaces, which has happened. You've seen some very innovative films in Bombay with with Mr. Bachchan and a lot of these film stars shooting at their own homes and editing it together. But that's not the way for a proper industry to grow. So, and like we say, I feel we are obsessing about the future a little too much. How do you change human nature, which has been set in place for the last, I don't know how many thousand years? Man is a social animal. He needs to be out there. There's a limit to how much he can stay inside. There's a limit to how much you can put him there. The minute you open the gates, he's going to run out there. The people who are always sitting at home are still not going to run out there because they're used to that. But people who are always, yeah, I mean, how do you tell adventurer or a person who does hiking, you can't hike for the rest of your life? It's not going to happen. So the future is going to be very dynamic. It's going to be very interesting to see how the younger generation takes it forward. But I think we are obsessing about it too much.
So are we waiting for the gates to open? Is that
okay? So I'm already at work since 15 days. I'm going to my studio alone. My staff is working from home because I'm really close to home. And I've been going every day. 15 days, I've been going up and down. And today I had to go 20 kilometers away for some work, just to drop something and pick up something. And I was shocked that it took me 45 minutes to an hour on my way back. So people are already on the street. They're already out of the gates in Bombay, at least.
All right. So there is, like you say, we are obsessing, and probably things are not going to change that much. Probably modes of functioning are going to change. And that brings me to my favorite question in the list of the things that I thought I would discuss. And I thought I would put it to Rupert, since his work revolves around this. Says, in all the change that we are talking about, what is it that is going to remain the same? For example, cultural and regional nuances that one talks about. Is everything going to be flattened, or are those nuances still going to be there? Rupert? Yeah. So the sameness and the change.
Yeah. I know. I was just noting it down and thinking. I mean, it's a very good question. And thank you for the question, and also thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure as well as an honor to be back at fantastic establishment, NIFT, where you kindly invited me a good sort of 18 months ago, where it was fantastic to be there in physically. So let me think. The question, what remains to say? Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I think it's important to think about the future at the same time as also, in a way, as a critical social theorist, I'm always very wary of it. I think an important thing is to try and identify where the changes are taking place, and then to try to think about where they could potentially lead, depending on how the forces play out. So, I mean, in terms of what remains the same, I actually find that almost harder than what may change, funnily enough, because I think one of the big questions is obviously what we have seen. I think it is very interesting that everybody is, you're quite right, forced into a situation of wondering where next, and that international state, I think, is doubtless unheard of. That state of wherever you are in the world, people are putting these questions, but that also they're quite, although they're the questions emerge in different ways in different locations. So that's how I would answer this, you know, or dwell on the nation of the flatness. So undoubtedly, the set of questions emerge from an interconnected issue, which has been thrown up, which is in some sense the same issue everywhere, but which already plays out differently in different locations. And that's the same for how the questions are put and obviously the responses. So thinking about that, so we've all understood internationally something which we kind of knew, but we didn't know in what way we knew it or how it would impact and when. So we knew that we live in an economic system which was heading for some form of ruin, in a sense, because we knew that it's based on an accumulation and expansion and growth model, and yet it's arriving at the limits of the biological potential to draw things into that accumulation system, let's say. So many people thought maybe there was some sort of environmental catastrophe would be the end point of the accumulation system. And in fact, it's not environmental, but it's biological in another sense. So it has taught us something that within very different ways, we've realized that there's a physical, let's say, material impact of economic system, which would bite back in some way. And then interested, so then it's also taught us, you know, as we begin to sort of lift the stone, what is that? What caused that impact? Well, we've realized it's to do with the interconnection of the production system. So it's to do with, maybe it's about big agriculture, so big farms, and the way that they have created the conditions for the emergence of extremely virile pandemics through essentially over-exploitation of the animal and world, let's say. We know also that it's through the way that populations have been forced into close proximity and not necessarily salubrious context through the workers of the world. But we also know that its impact is to do with the fact that there's been underinvestment, obviously, in health, and then there's overexposure of certain groups of people to the impact of the, let's say, the playing with risk of our economic system. And that's where it's quite different, because, say, in the UK, the discourse has mostly been around the overexposure of, for example, health workers, but it's also been, say, people working in retail, perhaps supplying us through supermarkets, but also the big retailers such as Amazon, who still have to work away, while frequently the middle classes, so the ones who are slightly up from those bottom levels, are able to continue to work in safe environments from their home, because they're working online, for example, and they're working perhaps in design itself. Whereas from my perspective, reading only online English language Indian media, for example, in India, it's a story much more important would be, say, the workers in, say, fashion work who are so overexposed. So working classes of a different nature. So where if we take just the fashion context, then we could say frequently it might be Amazon in the UK, but it's actually manufacturers in places around South Asia, for example, who are taking the brunt of the virus in terms of being under enforced lockdowns and with no help with basically riding out the slamming down of the supply chains. Okay, that's quite long already. I'll try and cut this down. So I think we get this kind of general idea that we're all in a set of questions. We've understood that we're somehow interconnected within them, but they play out differently. And we've understood that that the fashion system is very much part of that, but also the way that the fashion system connects. Now, a group that we haven't thought about is it connects capital in different parts of the world and workers in different parts of the world. And somehow the stretching out of that interconnection is what is behind a very differential impact. But we know that internationally, there's a growing middle class who have traditionally managed, both in North and South, again in different ways, managed that huge difference between the Ambanis and the Bezoses, who are able to draw the capital out, and the workers in the Bezos's retail centers or otherwise, the various forms of garment industry in India, be it, with factory, domestic, all these different environments. And the middle classes, the deal has always been, well, the middle classes are going to grow, absorb it, and somehow manage the political situation to make it, to ride it out. And I think the biggest change and the biggest question for me, now, obviously we're talking in a higher education context, so we're talking about people who are working their way into middle class production, in a sense. So they're getting skills to draw them from perhaps the bottom labor, the bottom regions of workforce into design, communications, etc. So the biggest question when I look at it, and that's the same everywhere, obviously a lot of those very insecure middle classes have been relying on the communications system and its advertising to, in a sense, maintain this unsustainable economic process, which overexploits the bottom, overpays the top, but also allows those in the middle a sort of a precarious escape from the bottom. And the big question, if you look, I was amazed to see actually I can't remember who now, but an Indian Instagram influencer, and watching Indian Instagram, it's the same as it's everywhere in a sense. These people have been playing a waiting game because they want to know, when they don't know what comes next, at the same time, they've got to keep, without advertising funding, they've got to maintain the audiences in the hope that what comes next is still a consuming middle class who will fund the advertising, which will continue to maintain them in a slightly better position than the bottom. Now, if that does not come next, those middle classes will no longer be in a position of seeking to generate hegemony, in a way, of managing the difference between the Ambanis and the bottom. If that happens, how that plays out, that's going to be interesting. Do they side with the working classes and look for a different model of production, which isn't about joining the top? And we see that with the way Reliance now is with Facebook, aren't they? So we see this growing monopolization of the communications environment. So if they cease to feel a benefit from being in the middle, perhaps we've got some interesting change.
All right. I think I held on to a few things there, and I was thinking that if I put the same question to Dave, who is a technology guy, and ask him that is there anything that is going to remain the same, probably that's going to be a laughable question for him. I don't know, but so therefore the question is that Vikram talked about the world that is already going digital. And we already have people who have been talking about it from the beginning of the century, that the digital world is going to be flat, or the commercial world is going to be flat, where the borders blur and the opportunities are going to be democratic. So Dave, what do you think? Is the digital world really going to be flat and opportunities are going to be equal for everybody, or the class conflicts that Rupa talked about will still play out?
Okay, Interesting. Thanks for having me here again. And what I say here is my own personal opinions, not the opinion of my organization that I work in. So I think this is most probably the odd man out here, purely a technology guy. So let me start off by saying something in the context of what you just now said. It's not the strongest or the intelligent who is going to survive. It will be the person who is able, or it will be institutions who are able to respond to the change. Okay? Now, that is something that I did not say. That is something that Charles Darwin said. Okay? That is the reality. Like today, if you look at the challenges the company and I predominantly will speak about enterprise experiences that I have. There has been, take COVID out for the last 6 months. If you take that out, I think no one can take it out. But if you take that out, we still had unprecedented disruptions that were happening in the industry. The unprecedented disruptions was happening because of technology. It was happening because of social needs of people. And it was happening because of regulatory issues. You would have seen numerous instances where the Facebooks and the Googles of the world have had to face regulatory challenges everywhere. And on top of it, if you bring in the pandemic, then it's a fantastic situation that we have today. It's challenging. Everyone calls it the new normal. But if you ask anyone to define the new normal, no one has a clear definition of a new normal. It is all up to individuals to define the new normal. And that new normal, I think, will depend in how enterprises, people respond to this new normal. The people who are able to respond quicker, I think, will be the ones that will be successful. Yes, old business models will go away. If you look today, what are the challenges that we all find out? People talk about digital. Yeah, it is digital. People think that if I have a web page, maybe 10 years back, people said that was digital. Then if you had an app, people said it's digital. Digital is not just an app or a web page. It's a modem by which you connect with people. It's an environment or a platform with which you connect with your customers to give them differentiated experiences. It's a platform through which you can get insights and give personalized experiences. Because today in this world, everyone is looking for personalized experiences. Technology and digital helps, because take the pandemic situation that we are in, as Vikram was saying, we're all locked into this room. Just go back 18 years. 18 years ago, smartphone was not invented. We just had those Nokia phones where you could send SMSs. If this pandemic had happened, India announced the lockdown on 21st of March, 2020. God forbid, if this pandemic had happened on 21st of March, 1995, we would not be having this Zoom session because India opened up internet on 15th of August, 1995. But the pandemic happened 100 years earlier. Human beings survived. We will also survive, but it will only be the people who will be responsible to this changing need. Now, I think Vikram spoke about the innovation, the social platform. I think that's very crucial. Today, when we talk about appliance and when we talk about it, it's all about differentiation. It's all about personalization. It's all about creating market-making platforms. Okay, the technology has never been a disruptor. The technology has always been there. Like if I take some of the examples, and most of you would know some of these things that happened in the past because they're very close to you. IBM Watson and Marchesa had a partnership where they defined the cognitive dress. Okay, and you would have seen that I think it was Carolina Kurukova's dress that was designed using that cognitive element. If you look into India, the Vogue Award, I think of 2017, where I think Gaurav Gupta and IBM Watson designed that sari gown. If you look at the movie trailer Morgan, that was predominantly defined by an artificial intelligence from IBM Watson. There was no human involved in it. If you look at what the work that we did, and I'm sorry, I'm just portraying IBM because I know that much better than other companies. The work that Falguni Sen Peacock has done around IBM Watson. Now, these are things that were not done 6 months back. These are things that was done 2 years back, 1 year back. The technology always exists. It's how you use that technology today end to end to make it give your customers an experience is the challenge. For example, if you look at 20 years back, what was the philosophy? We used to say that processes are run by people, like even in the communication design industry, if I take that, and I'm not an expert there, but earlier, I'm quite sure it was the processes that were run by people with technology being supported. In today's world, processes are run by technology and human augments them. If you look at the examples that I took about Marcheja, and if you look at the YouTube of Falguni Chen, Peacock, they're all saying one thing. It's the technology that gives the insights, the humans takes the decisions, okay? So that is where I think you will see this coming in more and more again. And if you look at digital, and if you try to look at it as a small pyramid, digital is the tip of the pyramid. Digital is your, what I call it, the system of engagement. It is how you engage with your customer. Beyond that is what we call the system of insights. That is all the data that is being created, the structured data, the unstructured data, what's available in social media, what is proprietary data. You create that insights. And those insights comes from the data that is generated. Every time we are talking, every sentence that we are talking or everything that's happening today is data in some form. So the data, you take the data, from that data, you create that insights, personalize that insights, put it into that digital, which we call the system of engagement. Like Liverpool. Liverpool is also in one of my clients. To give a customer experience, Liverpool has used this model of digital experience. So they have taken all the data past Liverpool goals that they have scored, who have scored the goal, who have scored against it, from where did the attacks start, and they have then given a fantastic experience to a Liverpool fan. So I can sit on my mobile phone while Liverpool, when there is a break that's happening for 15 minutes, I can tweet around and I can look around the history as to where Liverpool was strong and where Liverpool did well. So just to summarize, I think when you look into this entire communication design for the future, digital definitely will be, we call it the digital reinvention, but you will have to look at processes that are run by technology or where people only come in to take the decision, because an IDC report says that in 2025, every 18 seconds, individuals will have an interaction with a digital entity, okay? And 2025 is just 5 years from now. Every 18 seconds, you are going to have a digital experience.
Oh, wonderful. That was absolutely, it just took us through that entire journey of what digital would mean and should mean. And that I thought would be relevant to Daniel's work, who works in the area of experience design, because they talked about creating differentiated experiences and engagement. And I really liked what you said about technology developing the insights and humans taking the decision. So, Daniel, do you have such an experience in the work that you have done in the digital world for experience design? We cannot hear you.
Could you repeat the question in terms of what kind of experience were you referring to?
No, because they just talked about experiences, that digital is not just an entity which is just outside. It is something that needs to be adapted and to create differentiated experiences, engaging experiences for customers or audiences. So that is, and that's what I understood from how to use digital in the true sense. So I wanted to know whether in your experiential design work and projects, do you use digital in this way to create experiences?
Yes. Most of the time, digital or the use of computational technologies play a vital role in kind of every aspect of a project. And I think it's kind of I think ultimately it's incredibly naive or ignorant to think of this kind of form of experience now that is not embedded with kind of computational technologies and on kind of almost every level. I think also if you think of think of the human body as a kind of certain form of kind of technology itself. It's like it's constantly developing and mutating, and sort of through various kinds of integrations of external technologies as well. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think kind of the use of digital as again as kind of one specific type of technology that has a particular kind of logic to it, then we are, yeah, I mean, we are in a kind of a moment where that is just embedded in almost kind of everything that we sort of do in varying degrees, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think
yeah, also I wanted to, yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, I think we have to, I mean, there's a really interesting sociologist called Scott Lash, and he refers to this kind of the period that we're in now as a kind of as a period of technological experience. So he kind of defines this as a kind of that's one of the sort of defining features of our kind of epoch, I guess, or a kind of moment. So I think we do have to think of, I think, this kind of distinction between sort of digital and sort of whatever non-digital, or I mean, in very kind of European, I guess, like terms, as a kind of current thing where we kind of use like this kind of distinction between IRL and URL, and it's like this kind of whatever, and it, you know, like that. I mean, that is a thing, but I think it's like we are. There's also something quite naive about that, or quite almost sort of like romantic or something about that. Like, I think we have to really deal with the reality that we are technological beings, and we kind of occupy and share this world with other technological beings or species, and sort of digital is just one aspect, another kind of almost like another species in a way that we sort of have to learn to live with, you know.
Right. Okay. Whether digital or not, I was just thinking that Ravi, design was usually seen and attached to designing products which were tangible. But now, if we look at it as a profession which is only going to be dealing with the intangibles, so we're only going to be designing experiences which are only going to be sensed by certain sense organs. Do you think that is a change from tangible to intangible?
I mean, I think on a certain level, it's. I mean, I think it is a quite a profound shift that away from a kind of focus specifically on the production and the sort of guess like valorization of kind of objects, you know, towards kinds of towards the production of experiences. I mean, I think so. I think there is something very significant about that. And, you know, and you can also see that in terms of the, I mean, just economically, you can see that how that kind of plays out, you know, like intangible assets in the kind of market is an incredibly important aspect of a sort of company's stock value. You know, like any luxury brand, principally they're kind of something like between 50 and 80% of their stock value is based on their brand, right? And a brand is an intangible asset, right? So we're sort of, you know, like Apple, like 80% of Apple's stock value is based on their brand, right? So, and that's an intangible asset. So we are, you know, we are in this kind of moment where we, yeah, these kinds of intangible aspects or assets or are kind of the dominating. I say again, I speak very much from a sort of Western European sort of perspective, because I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world specifically, but I think it is a very there is a significant shift, and the role of products, it's not that those products go away. It's just that the role of those products kind of shift, and they act in a different kind of way. So it's not to say that, you know, everyone suddenly isn't producing any objects or commodities, whatever. It's just certainly at the moment, the commodities, those objects play a particular role in the production of experiences. And you see that even I mean, the other day I was talking to someone quite high up in a very kind of high kind of luxury brand in the communication department, and they were like talking about this in terms of like how they shape how the kind of products themselves are kind of how they function within the vision of the brand, you know. But it's all about the brand, you know. And these products are kind of currently the vehicle by which you sort of connect the brand to the customer. I mean, so you know, so there is a really, really significant shift, and I think that is something that I think designers and creators or whatever have to really take seriously. You know,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that kind of it doesn't mean that kind of those problems go away. They just kind of shift slightly, or they kind of the target kind of moves somewhat. So, you know, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much. Actually, coming full circle to Vikram, where you talked about we traversed digital and the fact that, you know, from products to intangibles is probably what designers would be designing. But you made a very pertinent point right in the beginning that probably in the kind of work that you do, it is just not possible to do that because there has to be people, there have to be physical. Physicality is a very important thing in the work that you do. So of all the top trends that one reads now about, you know, there were 3 of them which one picked up saying sustainability, safety, and purpose are probably going to be the top trends. So do you see that unfolding already? Safety you talked about, and purpose of, you know, not just probably being only a commercial purpose, but there's probably going to be a higher purpose in what people do, or is it still going to be the same?
You know, so, you know, I'll put a question across to the world. Let's look at it from India's point of view. Okay. I have the top, like we say, let's imagine the Ambanis. We have the farmers. Okay. As Rupert said, the middle class. How many classes does India have? Do we have a upper class, a higher middle class, a middle class, a lower middle class, a lower class, a lower class? How many levels of economies do India have? Or rather, when we talk about the lower class, how many years will it take them to reach the level of a Western civilization? So my point being, in terms of economics, we will still have to remain in a way same, or rather work on the same commercial prospects to, you know, I can say elevate ourselves, elevate the masses. So that commercial aspect is never going to go away from India, not for the next 100 years, because there are too many levels of economies, if you want to call it, for them to even come to a NIFT, you know. So when you say, you know, is there a higher purpose now? Well, I can say I had a call 15 minutes before this where I was talking to someone. Now, as a photographer, I'm also, like you said, a photo artist. So I like working on, you know, projects which are personal to me, or projects which I feel can, you know, start a conversation on social, you know, physical, emotional, sexual levels. It's all there in my, you know, mind, and that's how I work. So I have a higher purpose, let's say shoot or a project where I will be creating works, you know, with very normal, regular people, which is unpaid for me. But the money is accumulated from that will be used to uplift some strata of the society. Now, let's assume I was doing maybe 3 projects like that. I may end up doing 5, 6, 7, 10 a year. But how do I take out the commercial side? Because from any business for that matter, from my business especially, because see, again, if I go back to my trade, I'm, let's say, assume for a minute, a photographer. Now, I have a client, I have an agency, I have a few levels in between, comes to me, I have a few levels below me of the people who work with me. And we all will survive through commercialization. So yes, your advertising and your photography may change, keeping in mind, or rather, like you say, trying to, amalgamate a little purpose, or a societal story, if you want to call it, in the work that I do. But I don't see that changing too much. I mean, I have a campaign for a close-up brand, let's assume. What is the higher purpose I can get out of that? So from a commercial aspect of our industry, even when it comes to fashion for that matter, you can only use your commercial side to push or help, or fund an aspect of society change, which will maybe from 10% may increase to 15 or 20%. But we run on an economical system all over the world. It's all about economics, and it all trickles down from the top coming down to us. We are the really lower levels. It all, like Facebook, Reliance. I mean, I'm sure they're doing some sort of funding, from other people. They may increase that, but at the end of the day, I have to work with them. There'll be other people wanting to work with them. I have to survive. So I don't see society or work changing. We are more aware, I feel, as humanity, with this lockdown, of our insecurities, our abilities, our what do you say, empathetic side to us, where we are now, a little more open to the world, to cultures, to people, which I think is an added thing, which is a positive that has happened at this point. But I don't know how it's going to translate in the future. Like we say, again, we are thinking of the future too much, because most of us are trying to survive now, and we're trying
Exactly.
to survive the near future. So I don't know how far are you looking at this.
Thank you so much for the candid answer. I mean, you said it is too much of a systemic change to take out the commercials, and there are just too many things dependent on it. You change one thing, and probably something else will change adversely. So we need to look at it as a system. So I also wanted to know from Rupert, what do you think about these top trends, or would you like to add another to it? Sustainability, safety, and purpose, Rupert. Is there anything else that, or probably these are not the top trends now?
I mean, I think that was, I thought that was a really interesting, illuminating answer from Vikram, actually. I thought this point, which I have very much seen, obviously as an academic, it's a different but very related issue. So academia is obviously increasingly driven by the commodified bottom line, basically. So getting space to develop social projects, which in an academic sense includes just the space to critique, is obviously an issue. And it's an issue, and I think it is a defining issue for that middle, for those broad, exactly as Vikram says, the many middle class positions, where in essence what you're struggling, the struggle to communicate an alternative is a defining feature under conditions which are not, where there's actually the primary need is to make the money to survive and to maintain that position. But so I think, well, an interesting one has been a really, really interesting one. And I think it's an interesting one again into that sort of returns to your question, Rupa, the first question about the difference, flat or not flat, has been the Black Lives Matter. It's been really interesting, both, I mean, obviously that's an American, very much defined by America. It's defined by the fact that obviously somehow in whatever it is we're experiencing, one of the things we're experiencing is the wavering, perhaps the end of American hegemony. And so whatever defines the outcome from this is partly going to be associated with that. Is it replaced by a sort of multipolar world? I mean, we can see in some sense that already, say China has been able to take a position on how it controls a pandemic, which seems in a funny way to be associated with China's rise in challenging the US hegemony. But we can see that also playing out in somewhere like Kerala, where it also be, you know, similarly a very leftist state able to produce responses to the pandemic which are different. So maybe we come out with a social, you know, a greater possibility for what Vikram was talking about there, social responses rather than simply commercial responses. And that would mean giving room also for the creative, the communicational work to be social communicational work rather than simply struggling to survive through low autonomy, quick turnaround projects. But so the Black Lives Matter, I think, is a really interesting one. And it's interesting that, you know, it traveled a lot. It's traveled, obviously, it's been massive in the UK. And it's a question, what is it? Is it a question that's purely an identity question? Or for many people, what's been interesting is it seems to have put the identity questions into the context of structural questions to a new and interesting degree. So it seems potentially to be something which can be a mobilization of a general working class emancipation. But interestingly, one of the best analyses that I've read of it is from a Bengal academic site. And I thought it was interesting. It seemed interesting to me. Sanati, I don't know if anyone's sort of come across it. It's pretty small, but it's very much an interesting kind of journal and I thought it was interesting that from an Indian perspective, the Black Lives Matter struggle and both its potentials and limitations were perhaps more clear because of the nature of Indian identity and politics being at the same time both similar and different. So it's the same issue, how to take these incredibly important challenges to the injustices of our system and turn them into something which is strong enough to make not simply a kind of how they put in Sanati is a kind of reformist change, but to make it actually a genuine systemic change that removes the conditions which pitch people against each other. And as they say there, they think of it not simply in terms of black and white, but also in terms of caste and religion, and to take all of these identity, the challenges which pitch identity positions against each other and turn that into saying COVID has risen, it's thrown up the injustices of our economic system, and we have to remove those injustices in order to pull everybody out of different forms and levels of oppression.
Oh my God! Yeah, I would like to read what the references that you gave, because I haven't read them. So
I'll put the Sanhati days.
Okay.
That's the journal, and it's a good. You could find it on the George.
All right.
George Floyd articles quite recently. It's probably the last couple of days.
Okay. All right. So I would like to take an apolitical. I would like an apolitical view on technology again. Coming back to Dave, that we've had students working on, and students and professionals working on the virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence, and all of that. They were early adopters, but now I think that's going to become mainstream. So how do you look at it going mainstream? And it's not just something, it's as a new technology that only can do these wonderful things, but it is going to be very normal to use it.
Yeah, so as I said in my earlier segment, that technology will not be the disruptor, okay? And it will not create anything by itself. So even if you're thinking of a market-making platform, technology can be an enabler. Technology, you can buy the most advanced technologies. Like in our parlance, we use a very simple equation. We use the equation called OO plus NT is equal to EOO. It's basically nothing like old organization plus new technology gives you expensive old organizations. And we have seen that. So not being customer centric, I think is the biggest challenge that, the biggest threat that every enterprise will face. Now, when you look into, and if you take a step back, and I think Rupert and Vikram also made that, if you look at what is happening in the new normal or what will happen, the customer sentiments have changed significantly. Their buying patterns have changed significantly. Today, everyone is a PhD in a university called WhatsApp. And they're trying to get their doctorates as soon as possible. So there is a significant urge in terms of, and you're seeing people who have never used maybe digital so extensively have started using those digital things extensively. Grandparents are the only way that they are communicating with their kids is through these Google Duo or through Zoom or through WebEx. So they are also getting attracted to it. So we look at three things. Today, people are genuinely concerned about their well-being. They're concerned about their future. They're concerned about their economy. There are widespread concerns about job losses. If you look at Western countries, there is significant amount of furloughs that are happening. And if you look in India and everywhere, there are salary cuts. People have unpaid salary for the last 3 months, which they have not got. And then the big question that comes in is that, and I think for all of us, for all of you who are focused on branding, is this entire thing of ethical decision making. None of us, I think here, especially in India, trusts what our elected governments say. None of us trust what our medical folks are saying, that it is safe to go out and all that. So this ethical decision making will become something of the past, or something of the future. And what will technology, and you took some examples of technology, let me tell you, I think the thing that is driving this behavior of customer is this exponential technologies that are already in place and that are coming. See, for example, in the fashion industry, I hope some of you have started working on it. The advent of 5G and edge computing, okay, where you can jolly well teleport a person. That's the realms of possibility. Teleport a person. So Vikram can teleport a person in his studio now using that technology and take some pictures. That's realms of possibility, that realms of use cases with 5G and edge computing coming up. Things like blockchain. Something very important today I think for people who are doing this brand. Say, for example, you're a great fashion house, or you yourself are a great entrepreneur who have created your own personal eminence and your brand of while designing clothes. Okay, now you have come up with a fantastic cloth with diamonds all around. What's your weakest link in that entire chain? Is that each and every diamond you have to ensure that it is not blood diamond. How do you ensure that? That is technology like blockchain comes in. It tells you from the source, from where it is coming. I think Rupert or Vikram or someone mentioned about farming. I think Rupert mentioned about farming in his earlier stage. Look at what Yara is doing with IBM. They are basically going to the farmers to tell the end consumers where that piece of product has come in. And that will become very, very essential in this pandemic. The pandemic started from a wet market in some country. So when you're buying something new, you might jolly well go and ask the big brands and the retailers, please tell me from where do you have sourced your products. It might be a thing of the future. Similarly for you, new technologies have already come in. AR, VR has been there. It has now become an integral part. Today we buy our lenses using AR, VR. We do everything with AR, VR. We play tennis with Roger Federer using AR, VR. You can put on your new clothes using AR, VR, but new emerging technologies of 5G, edge computing, blockchains. And again, I will go back to what Vikram said. You will have to think a way of making a market-making platform. It is the platform companies today which are making the world. If you look at the example, some of the examples that you took, Amazon, people call Amazon as an e-tailer or retailer, but it's a platform business. Netflix is a platform business. Uber is a platform business. Okay, so Netflix did not kill Blockbuster. Blockbuster was killed because of their the high late fees that they used to charge. Uber did not kill the taxis. The taxis were killed because of limited access and because of how they were being controlled. Apple did not kill the music industry. The music industry killed by itself when they said that if you only want to hear one particular track, you will have to buy that entire piece of record. Amazon did not kill the retailers. It's poor services that kill the retailers. So again, it's all about platforms. It's all about using technology. It's all about looking at your processes end to end, using technology, automate those processes, and using the human to come in and make those decisions. New technologies will come in. There will be old technologies which will also be useful. But the other thing that I wanted to just share with you, one has to be very clear that today's world, and I was hearing was Rupert was talking and the question that you asked him, is that yes, everyone wants to do something, safety, security is good, but at the end of the day, you will have to create value. You will have to create value to large enterprises. Only when a value is created can you monetize. You can create the greatest digital solution, but if you can't monetize it, there's no point in creating that. So create that value, create so that can be digitized. Look at your processes in such a manner that your technology drives your processes from end to end, where the human comes in only to take the decision. And for the future, as I said, if after every 18 seconds there has to be a digital interaction, how are you getting yourself trained and upskilled? Every industry, every person in all industries, there is a significant scope of getting trained and upskilled. Like Daniel talks about this entire aspects of design thinking. The design thinking, people have to get trained. You can't become a design thinker all of a sudden. You solve problems using design thinking, where you bring in the CXOs, you bring in the customers, you bring everyone together. Just not to look at problems, just to look at how the business is looking, then your problems comes up. So technology will be there, but please don't misunderstand that technology will solve your problems just like that. It has to be your organization culture, how open you are. People talk about agility. In today's world, you have to be agile. You have to use technology in a very, very informed and a matured way. Have to create values that helps you to monetize, values that helps you to create or improve your net promoter score with your customers, and bring in technology in such a manner that your processes are driven by technology. Bandwidth of your key people are not locked in doing repetitive tasks. They do something value added, so that the next level of what we call the digital reinvention come in your organization, which your people and your customers will push through.
All right, thank you. I think bringing value probably can replace, a higher purpose. In fact, I have one of the questions from the audience, which I will ask in some time. But I just wanted to, have a very academic-oriented, a student-related question, because a lot of students are watching us right now, and one of the big questions in their minds is what is going to happen and what are the skills that they need to learn. So Daniel, if you could, throw some light on this, also in view of what they've said, and also from your experience as an educator, what are the new skills that the students need to learn in order to be relevant?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one to kind of answer, I guess. I mean, I think it's also very, I think it's also very, there's a certain level of specificity in terms of the specific industry or the specific type of expertise that one is kind of wanting to go into. So I think
communication or the,
yeah, I mean, I guess the thing, I mean, on a very sort of broad level, I think there is there's a real sort of demand or requirement, I think, to be able to cope with the conditional uncertainties that we're going to be facing. We're already facing, but that's only going to increase through the result of climate crisis, economic instabilities, a whole set of other kind of factors. So that kind of ability, I mean, I guess, you know, traditionally would be kind of referring to as kind of that agility to be able to kind of respond to changes that are thrust upon you, that are kind of outside forces, etc. I think, I mean, that is a real skill outside of any specific technological or kind of technical skills that you may develop, or whatever. That kind of human ability to be able to kind of respond to changes is a thing that I think more and more students will have to learn, because that is the condition that we are going to be facing, increasing instability and kind of uncertainty. So I think on that level, that's on a very kind of broad level, but that does then filter through in terms of like, how do you kind of develop an idea that you may feel very kind of passionate about or invested in? How do you deal with that, the possibility that suddenly that idea may have to change through kind of whatever reasons, you know? I mean, I just went through we just went through an experience where, you know, was teaching the final year students who had developed their projects for a whole year, developing in a particular way, kind of understanding it as, okay, this is going to be a kind of, maybe I'm producing a book, or maybe I'm producing an exhibition, or whatever it would be. And then suddenly, you know, we went into lockdown and they had to really, really rethink how they take their idea and kind of reformat it and kind of repurpose it into a way that's kind of relevant for the moments that they're living in now. And I think, you know, this is also something that a lot of design studios are kind of increasingly aware of, especially as their projects as well become much more experiential and involve a whole set of different factors. So they may be working on a project where it may be a kind of, part of it may be an app, part of it may be a branded experience or an exhibition, part of it may be a kind of graphics that are part of a screen or whatever, you know, part of it may be a movie or a film or video. You know, so like, how do you, I think the overall skill in terms of whatever it is to try and be really good at defining or identifying a core element that is agile enough to be able to respond to those kinds of different changes that are totally outside of your control, you know, like, and that is it is a skill, you know, it's a kind of intellectual skill or kind of analytic skill. It's kind of involves a certain level of strategy, and obviously that kind of agility, or I mean, I kind of prefer the term sort of plasticity, you know, this level of plasticity in terms of how do you respond to changes that are put on you, and how can you kind of respond to that in meaningful ways. Because I think then the other things in terms of like specific technical skills, that is something often that you can learn, I mean, relatively straightforwardly through the flattening, shall we say, of a lot of or access to a lot of kind of tutorials and things like that. You know, this is on a certain level. You know, I'm talking about if you are a kind of designer wanting to kind of go into the kind of creative industry. If you're wanting to be working on a kind of as a coder or as a developer, or you know, working in AI, I mean, that's a different kind of set of skills, you know, like there's a different level of expertise that is needed, you know. But as a creative, you would possibly be working with that developer, you know, on a project, right? So you have to have a certain type of knowledge, a certain level of knowledge to be able to, it's almost like translator knowledge, you know, in a sense, you know, being able to work with these different people with a whole set of different skills, and have a different kind of language, and you be able to understand that to a certain level that you can actually communicate with them. Like that is, I think that is going to be like above all else, it's like a really, really crucial skill. As the projects that we work on become increasingly complex and involve a whole set of different kinds of formats, different kinds of media, etc., etc.
Right, I can totally relate to that because NIFT recently went through an entire huge curriculum change, and when they were trying to address, this is before the COVID, of course, but then we said, what are the skills that the student needs to be equipped with? And then also the more particular instances that you gave where, because of this situation, the briefs had to change and the way the students had to respond to it had to change. And we went through the same thing. And also for the graduating batch of students who were working with the industries. So there was a whole set of challenges where they needed to change their approach. And most of them were able to do that. But we just still did find some gaps, and we realized that that is probably a very important skill that we need to give the students, where they are able to adapt to uncertainties and change and get on top of it. So
yeah, I mean, I would just say off the back of that, I mean, I think that again, this would be something that is this is almost, in a way, it's like a precursor for how we have to get mentally, I guess, get our head around dealing with the climate crisis. I mean, on a very sort of broad level, climate crisis forces on us a kind of level of conditional uncertainty that we have to, or instability, and we have to sort of learn to kind of respond to that. I mean, again, like certainly in the West, and certainly in Europe and Northern Europe, whatever, we have lived through a period where, we have a kind of certain level of sort of stability, and it would be foolish for us to think that it will just go on like that, because it's certainly, like the climate crisis will force us to, to kind of adjust to increasing levels of instability on almost kind of every level, from a sort of global level to a kind of local level.
Right. Okay. All right. So, and Vikram, I think we can start it with you, and possibly Sushmita. I think this would be the last question that we can take. There are still apprehensions of the graduating batch now, where they say that, what is the state? Are we going to get any jobs? People are losing jobs. So what is it that we do? So is it really true that people in the creative industry, also people are without jobs or losing the ones that they have?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So, you can look at it like this, where a lot of, big houses, fashion, media, communication, advertising, they're using this time to prune their organizations. Like, even Daniel and Rupert and everybody, even they've been saying, we need to be agile, adapt. So a lot of bigger organizations are using the opportunity to become agile, to be more streamlined, to understand which areas, departments they don't want to focus on now, which are going to be profitable to go forward. So I know a lot of people in our industry who have already lost jobs, unfortunately, working on subsidized salaries. Well, let's go back to the job loss. It is huge. It is huge. There have been people I've worked with, or organizations where I worked with a team of people for 15 years, and suddenly it shut down out of the blue, because it makes sense to the organization to close that one department. Even if it was making an X amount of profit, it was not viable for them. So having said that, uh, see, this is change. Life is all about change. We will go up and down, whether it is COVID, whether it is an a climate change, any type of calamities or changes that come across. There will be constant changes. What's happening now is that maybe because of media being so powerful, access to information being so easy, and a pandemic which we never expected, we are seeing this maybe on a little higher scale. We are being aware of it much more than when we were aware earlier. It's happening now across industries, not like one industry or two industries. So there are, a lot of these things happening, job losses happening. But for me, I've never looked at life as a loss, if you want to call it. I've always looked at it as an opportunity. And I think this is an opportunity for a lot of creatives, a lot of people out there to maybe revamp, restructure their own lives, go independent, you know, understand their codes, understand their values, understand their, you know, abilities, their whether it is creative or management or accounting or whatever you may call it. This is the time when you know, refine yourself and go after the jobs you really want, or start a brand for yourself. I mean, I'm talking from a media or a fashion line. I mean, we don't need $1 million to start a brand. You could just start a t-shirt line, for example, for your students, or, you know, it doesn't really cost money necessarily. Yes, money is needed for everything. Economy is important. It needs your will to go out there and push harder. It needs your will and your, yeah, to understand your weak points, improve on them, like, you know, improve on your talents. Like Daniel said, use tutorials. Of course, there's a limit to where you can go, but it'll be a journey for a lot of us. And I think, uh, given the fact that there are already job losses, there's no denying that and thinking in future there will be more. No, it's a trend now. Everybody is going to be faster, agile. If things are not working, okay, get rid of that department. It's not, it will not be so much about, okay, are we feeling bad about so many people losing jobs? No, it'll be about survival for everyone, from an individual to a company. So, having said that, the people who lose jobs, especially in our industry, I think look at it as an opportunity. Innovate, like I've been saying, like, you know, try and see what else you can see. See, I'll tell you from my point of view, as a photographer, as a professional in the industry, I've not worked for 3 months. I'm not so sure I'll be working for the next 3 months. But I can't be sitting like this and saying, okay, I'm going to learn new skills. I'm going to, you know, wait for jobs to come to me. No, I need to make an effort to, you know, like Dave said, use the technology to innovate, use the technology or the opportunities that we have to create something new. uh, so that's it. I mean, you have to look at it like an opportunity. Job losses are going to happen. They're already happening. So we can't be sitting on our asses and saying, I'm safe. No one is safe. I don't think anyone over here is safe.
All right. On this note, there is a question from the audience which says, on one hand, we talk about job losses, and then on the other, hard sell techno solutions that replace human jobs. Would it not be better to dial back some of the techno prevalence? Every invention or discovery need not be implemented. For example, there is no need to replace every teller for ATMs. Please respond. It could be anyone can take this question.
That technology cannot be stopped. Human beings can't be stopped. Science cannot be stopped. Knowledge cannot be stopped. It cannot be slowed down. It's not in our nature. It's not in our nature. What can happen is that we, you know, use our abilities, or rather, go back to ourselves and understand who we are, what we do as an individual, and what is it that we can give back to society, or what is it that we can bring value out there, which gives value to us. Like, you know, Daniel said, a brand. You are a brand. Every individual is a brand. You have to start thinking that. You do not have to think of yourself as a person going out there to look for a job. You have to think about yourself as a brand and what is your, you know, ability and your possibility. And I mean, go out there and rock it, if I say.
Yeah,
You know.
Dave, you want to respond? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I may just add, and I think I'll take a cue to what Vikram said. In the history of human mankind, we have never gone back and we'll never go back. What will happen is the adoption of exponential technologies will now move on steroids.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Today, will you go to an ATM where you see there are 10 people standing to withdraw money? Or will you use your PayPal or Paytm app to do that financial transaction?
Yeah.
If today you have something that can be done remotely, will you call a technician inside your house where you have elderly folks with heart disease or a diabetic? You will not, because our behaviors have changed. And technology today the adoption of technology will increase. But I do understand the underlying sentiments of that question. The underlying sentiments is this, that yes, in a matured economy, these things would be slightly easier. In an economy like India, where we have a large number of people who are not that educated. But for the most of the and if I look at an enterprise level, what every enterprise is telling its employee is this is very clear message. Be yourself updated from a technology point of view. If you are not updated, you will have challenges moving forward. We just finished, or we just reached 109, we just completed our 109th birthday in IBM. And if I look at the journey of this company, starting 109 years back to what we have today, it has just been the adoption of technology in my professional life. It's just being learning new things. Like just a couple of days back, I got myself a badge in automation because that's something that you need to learn on a continuous basis. I've got myself a badge on digital. Yeah, it's just not that I don't know, but I wanted to test myself. You get a badge after you pass something. So there has to be a constant effort for everyone. And as Vikram mentioned, like if you're unfortunate, if you don't have a job, you're at home, use the time to learn something new which is relevant for you moving forward. Okay. Interestingly, when COVID started, I have lots of friends. The biggest challenge when this lockdown started was that I got queries from school teachers in my extended family where they said, how are we going to do online classes? Okay. They are great teachers. They're fantastic teachers. They've taught for 20, 25 years. All that they needed to do was to adopt the technology called a Zoom or a Google Duo or a WebEx. And I wrote a LinkedIn article for them. Is there. If you go into my LinkedIn, you will find that. Like today in this world today, what is the one word that everyone talks of, right? It talks of online, right? It's online. And online, if you take the individual words, that's how I wrote. Online stands for opportunity for everyone, whether you are employed, not employed. N of that online mean it's a new ways of working. Please get used to it because the old world is not coming back. The L stands for learn new things. I start being innovative. You have to be innovative. And I think everyone in this planet said this. The N stands for network. If you can't do something, get someone who does it. Like if you talk about the plethora of technology, get someone who does it for you, form that team. And the last thing is very important in today's world with all depression. Enjoy what you're doing. In the online world, the E part, I call it the most important one, it's enjoy. So technology will not move back. I think the adoption of technology will be much more faster moving ahead.
All right.
I mean, can I just say, I think, I would say like, on a certain level, like if you wanted to stop certain technological developments, well, like, okay, that could be a task that you set yourself, but like, but who, like, how are you going to do that? That would be the question, you know? I mean, like technically it is possible for us to collectively say, okay, we're no longer going to use the internet, right? Like, I mean, we could all agree, right? But how would you do that? I mean, it's like it's such a big and seemingly kind of misplaced task. So I think the task would be sort of like, how do you, if your concern is with certain technological developments, then it would be, I think, a more strategic or more valuable kind of alternative would be to kind of look at what possibilities does that technology kind of facilitate, right? And, you know, I think things like the platforms and things like that, whilst in its current iteration, it has massively increased the levels of inequality, you know, like, and so I don't think necessarily that our current iterations of kind of platforms have been necessarily a kind of socially progressive kind of materialization, but I think for those who are interested in social progress, then the task is on us to kind of think through how do we use platforms in a way that's alternative to what Amazon are offering. I mean, like, we can't, like, that just seems a much more constructive and kind of realistic kind of a task, really. And then I think the thing is, then the other thing is that the question was about kind of replacing tellers with ATMs, and it's like, I think whilst on an immediate level there is a concern about kind of the job losses of certain kinds of jobs, but then but ultimately I would want to live in a world where there isn't that teller doesn't have a rubbish job. They can actually spend more time doing things that they want to do. You know, like that's the ultimate aim, right? It's not to trap them in really boring jobs that they don't want to do. You know, like so technology can be a means by which to kind of facilitate that, but it does take work, and it does take people who are on the left or socially progressive or whatever to actually think through how do you use these technologies in other ways than what they currently are being used in. And that is a task. That's a kind of creative, critical, strategic task, right? That's
I think I'd very much agree with that. I'd say it's got to be the ownership question. You know, if we have a situation in which ownership of the productive capacities of technologies belong to one class, of course they will cut it to the expense of others where they can. And again, I'll come back to say Kerala, we have a more socialist state who are able to use technologies for a social project and show that actually you can use them to manage this pandemic, to keep the numbers down, for example, through not about using the technologies for the ownership by a small number of exploiters to make agile decisions, but to make social decisions.
I think this is also sort of comes back to this when you were talking about kind of this flattening and kind of relating that to equality, and I think, or kind of equaling, I think we have to be really clear that flattening is distinctly different to equality. You know, we really have to be like really precise here. There is a kind of a fundamental sort of difference there. So a flattening doesn't equate automatically to equality. And where I think, you know, the technological landscape that we're seeing now, where like Jeff Bezos is like worth sort of whatever, almost $2 billion, whatever, like that isn't a flattening, you know, that's a flattening, but not an equality, you know.
Right.
So we have to sort of be clear about that, I think.
Absolutely. So Shmita, we have one more question and a comment. Do we have time to take that? Sushmita?
It's already 4. So if you can just quickly take the question if you want. Nitin has to, I'll just ask Nitin if you can take the question.
No, you ask and I will ask the question anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. How can designers make themselves relevant when they are the bottom of essential services? We have some cynics in the audience.
I don't quite understand at the bottom of the essential services. I mean, I think, I mean, that is the task of a designer. A designer is to make themselves relevant. Like as a designer, you're not like, it's not like a God-given right for you to be relevant. Like you have to make relevance, right? It's a like, and I think, you know, if you are relevant, then you will get work or get recognition or have kind of agency. So I think that, you know, on an individual level as the designer, that's your task to again, critically, intellectually, whatever, like actually and creatively find ways to make yourself relevant or make the work that you do relevant. But you know, you don't have any that relevance is not given to you, you know.
Very well said.
Yes, absolutely. I guess it meant that nowadays when we are opening things out, the essential services are the ones which get prioritized, or they are the ones who are going out there and doing stuff. Probably designers are not. I don't know. Probably
but I think,
comes from there.
In that case, and I think that's also then fine. Like the designer doesn't have to be at the top of the like yes, a designer kind of works in a kind of network or an ecology, right, of practitioners and experts. And so like if a nurse or a cleaner is seen as more relevant or essential than a designer, then fine, like okay. Maybe that's a sort of, maybe also that's a sort of sign of a better world.
So let me just add here. I think for someone who asked that question, let me tell you, in IBM, it's predominantly considered to be a technology company. We hire designers, okay, in a hardcore technology company, because, however, what Daniel mentioned is something that is very important. One has to be relevant. Don't take anything for granted. Just because today in any profession, if you think that I have acquired a degree from somewhere and there will be offers lined up on my doorstep, it's not going to happen. The other area that's extremely crucial today is that get a context of what you're trying to do. If you're a designer, if you're focusing on a particular industry, know that industry, because then you will be able to bring in much more value-added stuff. Because today, as I said, the process is run by technology, and unless and until you understand that process well, it will be difficult for you to add that value, which an enterprise or a customer or someone will be able to pay you that extra buck. Okay, so let me tell you that designers are absolutely essential in large multinational companies. In today, and I think Daniel would be an expert, all major problems and or reinvention or transformation in companies are done through design thinking, and designers are an integral part of that process. It is just that how you continuously upskill yourself, make yourself relevant, understand the context of the market, understand the new normal, and if you are focusing on an industry, understand that industry. And then you become a unique personality. And then you sell yourself. Also learn to sell yourself. That's the most important thing in today's world. You have to find a way to make sure that your personal eminence is known. And the personal eminence will only come from the digital platform, and you guys are the experts. So you understand the advantage that you have compared to someone like me who's predominantly a technology coder person. You are designers. You can sell your personal eminence into the platforms in a much better way than most of your peers in other groups.
So,
thank you. Yes.
I think, this question must have come from a fashion designer.
All right.
Design the way Daniel and Dave are understanding. But, what they've mentioned in the end is what the fashion designers need to understand, which I also mentioned earlier. You need to understand who you are. And like he said, you need to promote yourself. You need to make yourselves a brand, because I understand at this point as a fashion designer, designing, garments and selling them, and people not going to buy them. It's not a priority. It's not an essential item, like Daniel said, and it is not important right now. You can't be relevant compared to them. But to be relevant in your trade, you need to know how to sell yourself. Like they will say, you need to know how to sell yourself. You need to understand how to sell your product. What is it? Even if it's just a t-shirt, I understand it's not important right now for people out there to go and pick it up. But this is the time for you to start making a brand for yourself. Use the social platform, use digital technology to be known, to also when you talk about in the start sustainability, what are you giving extra? Whether it's just the cut of the garment, whether it's just the fabric that you're using, there's something you need to show, or it's your personality. So I guess we need to stop thinking about, are we going to be relevant now or in the future? And we need to start focusing upon becoming, or rather putting ourselves out there and showcasing who we are, our talents, and showing that this is who we are. And like Daniel said, do you want to be a teller all your life, or do you want to improve on yourself? This is what you want. This is the time to do that. Don't think about whether I'll make it or not. That's not important. You want to focus.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah.
I think it's a good point. I think also I'd say, essential. Essential is not a term without contestation. So, and I think that helps us to decide, when you say essential, let's make that decision, who or what is essential. So to come back to values, maybe something that's come out in the UK context, there's this term key workers. and frequently they've been positioned as working classes who are overexposed. And in a fashion context, we can think again, perhaps the essential are the working classes in the fashion context. So then we can think it as a design context, the question of who do you align yourself with? And we can think, okay, that comes back to sustainable, and that's sustainable work practices. In a Mumbai context, I might think perhaps Obertaimu, they look like a good, it's a small brand, but their designs are very much connected to drawing workers into both into a skilled working, but also into the front of the working practice. So I think you can decide, you can position yourself. Are you going to work for, do you see the essential as the I don't know, the massive brands, and the essential bit is money making? Or do you think, well, actually, I'm quite interested in, my essential is making it work for everybody? So
I would just to tap on that, I would also just say that I think this is also sort of a mark of a slightly kind of broader or more kind of a shift away from the kind of focus on like a star designer, it's kind of like figure, that kind of genius figure, and I think it's really important to start to, whoever, like, not to kind of stop that kind of thinking and think through like working within kind of collectives or communities, and whether that's communities, social communities, or whether it's communities within an organization, or whether it's kind of networks of people that you kind of work with on projects. It's like, think as a designer as thinking themselves as part of a kind of community or collective or ecology, right? It's like, and they're not this kind of idea of being like this kind of star designer, that kind of genius figure, I think is really a kind of very outdated kind of understanding. And I think that would be something to really kind of think through. It's like, thinking through that kind of idea as being a part of a collective or community or network or ecology. And you have a role within that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that is a lot of food for thought, and I'm just about getting warmed up. And Sushmita is not sending me any more questions. So, though there are many, I'm sure. But thank you very much for a very interesting and engaging conversation. And there are many points from which we can take off and have yet another webinar, I'm sure. Sushmita?
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, there are a few more questions, but we are running short of time. And hence, in case you have more questions, you can always email those questions to us, and we can get the answers to you. Sorry for not being able to reply to all the questions. And yes, Rupa, it was there are lots of food for thought. Yes, of course, indeed. And I, on behalf of my department, Fashion Communication of NIFT Mumbai, I would like to thank you, all the panelists, Professor Rupa Waldron, Professor Daniel Felsted, Mr. Vikram Bawa, Mr. Dev Kumar Majumdar. We never thought all of you can make it so many times, because we were having so many trials. We wanted to not have any disruption during the seminar. That's why we had to call you so many times. There were lots of changes of time to make it convenient for everybody. But we were so happy that every time we have changed the date and time, we have tried to get all of you together on the same page. Everybody was there to help us out. Thank you to all of you. I must thank our director, Professor Dr. Pawan Godiawala, for giving us this opportunity to organize this seminar. I must thank my course coordinator, Mr. Binish Tapre, for giving me the responsibility for coordinating. And so I got the opportunity. I could do this coordination. I could interact with so many people. To special thanks. One, Professor Rupa Narayan Agarwal, because a special thank to her because I just asked her if she can manage some time out of her busy schedule. She is very busy because she is the campus academic coordinator and we are having the assessment week coming up. And so she has to plan all the dates. But in spite of that, she agreed and she made it possible. So a big thank you to Professor Rupa Narayan Agarwal. And a special thank you to the tech team. Nitin Salve, sir, and Vandana Vekhande ma'am. Thank you so much for being there whenever I needed the help. Whenever I have called them at all odd hours, please, it was not meant for disturbing you. I was getting the query, so I had to disturb you people. Thank you so much for making it happen and making all the arrangements. Thanks a lot. Thank you all. And thanks a lot to the audience for attending the webinar. Thank you.
Great being here, guys, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us. Take care. Bye-bye. Be safe.
Real
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thanks for questions to the audience as well. Good questions.